Hi guys, welcome back to my kitchen. Today I am restocking our pantry with homemade marshmallows and homemade graham crackers. It is bonfire season for us. Where we live, we deal with a lot of forest fires, and so fire bans come into effect pretty quickly. We're honestly probably not too far off from them. So with that, we are trying to fit in as many bonfires as we can, and a bonfire is just not complete without homemade s'mores. So I'm going to be sharing these two recipes with you today. Both are super easy to put together. They really do not take a whole lot of effort and a lot cleaner ingredients than what you can find in store. To a saucepan, I'm adding 2/3 of a cup of water and then 2.5 cups of cane sugar. And then I'm going to stir this together and turn this up to medium-high heat and allow that to come to a boil. So what's great about this recipe is it doesn't have any corn syrup in it, which I love. Now, I have a couple different recipes for marshmallows on my website, but this recipe is my favorite for roasting. I find they just hold up better. That being said, homemade marshmallows will tend to melt a little bit faster than a store-bought marshmallow, no matter how you make them. So if you want to make a refined sugar-free marshmallow recipe, I have a honey marshmallow recipe that I'll leave in the description box down below. You can roast those as well, but I do find that the cane sugar-based marshmallows roast a little bit better. So once the sugar and water mixture has come to a boil, I reduce the heat down to medium, add a lid, and let that sit for 3 minutes. After the 3 minutes is up, I allow the sugar mixture to continue to simmer until it reaches 245 degrees Fahrenheit. You can use a candy thermometer for this. Honestly, if I do use a thermometer, I just use a meat thermometer. That works just fine, but I've done this many times, and at this point, I find that I can get the right consistency without using a thermometer. While the sugar mixture is still simmering, I am adding a 1/2 cup of water to the bowl of a stand mixer, and then 7 teaspoons of gelatin. I like to use this grass-fed beef gelatin. I'll link it in the description box down below. And something that I find works best is if you measure out the gelatin separately before, instead of just measuring it directly into the water, because it's going to start to bloom immediately. So if I measure it out separately, I can kind of avoid any clumps with the gelatin a little bit better. So 7 teaspoons. And I'm going to sprinkle that over top of the water and allow that to bloom for about 5 minutes. If there are any bits of gelatin that did not bloom, I don't worry about it too much. I will just get this mixing in the stand mixer on low for maybe 30 seconds or so before adding in the sugar syrup. Once the sugar syrup has come to temperature, I remove the pot from the heat and allow any bubbles to subside. And then with my stand mixer on low speed, I will slowly pour in that sugar syrup to the stand mixer, add a pinch of salt, and then I'll increase the speed to medium-high for 4 minutes, and then increase the speed again to high for another 4 minutes. While the marshmallow mixture is beating in the stand mixer, I will go ahead and prepare a pan. I like to use a 9x13. You can use an 8x8 or a 9x9 if you want a thicker marshmallow. So I will just lightly grease that with a little bit of butter or coconut oil. And towards the end of the marshmallow mixture beating, I'll add a splash of vanilla extract, and then you need to move a little bit quickly because the marshmallow mixture will start to set. And I just spread that into my pan, and then I'll dust the top of the marshmallow mixture with a little bit of powdered sugar, and then I'll set this aside and let these set for at least 6 hours, ideally overnight, before slicing into them, and then I'll toss them with a little bit more powdered sugar so they don't stick together. And these will last at room temperature in an airtight container for several months. While the marshmallows are setting, I'm going to get started on my graham crackers. Now, this recipe I'm going to be making with a gluten-free all-purpose flour blend. You can use in equal measurements just regular all-purpose flour, or you can also use oat flour. However, I do find that I need a little bit more when I use oat flour. As always, the full recipes will be in the description box down below. So I'm going to start out with adding a 1/2 cup of sugar to a bowl. This is going to be a 1 bowl recipe. Along with 6 tablespoons of melted butter. I'm also going to need 3 tablespoons of milk. And a tablespoon of molasses and a splash of vanilla extract. I'm also going to add an egg and then get this whisked together really well. Next, I'm adding 2 cups of flour. Again, I'm using just a gluten-free all-purpose flour blend. This is Bob's Red Mill in the blue bag. I didn't quite have enough of the Bob's Red Mill, so I'm just topping this off with a little bit of brown rice flour. These graham crackers are super forgiving. I'm adding a half teaspoon of baking powder, a half teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of cinnamon, and then I'm just going to mix this together until a dough forms, and then I'm going to transfer the bowl to the fridge just for a few minutes while I preheat the oven to 300. While the dough is chilling and the oven is preheating, I am just measuring out some parchment paper, and then I like to sprinkle it with a little bit of flour, and I'm going to roll out the dough directly onto the parchment paper that I'm going to bake it on. So I just sprinkled the top of the graham cracker dough with a little bit more flour, and I'm going to roll this out to about 1/8 of an inch thick. And then I'm going to cut this into squares using a pizza cutter. I find that to be the easiest. And then puncture each square with a fork. And then these are going to bake at 300 for about 30 minutes. So as you can see, I do not worry about the edges of the graham crackers being perfectly straight. I will just save those pieces to use for graham cracker crumbs in any baking that I do. And as soon as the graham crackers come out of the oven, I'm going to allow them to fully cool on the baking sheet. That's just going to allow them to crisp up really nicely, and then they will be ready to use. As for the marshmallows, they are still curing, but later today when I cut them into squares, I will toss them with some powdered sugar, and those will just store at room temperature. They'll last several months that way, and they are ready for roasting. Thank you guys for joining me today in my kitchen. If you try any of these recipes, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video.